preview Virginia today, do our prop shop, get you to Dabundo's digits. He makes his triumphant return as well. So it's a full preview podcast coming up on the Locked On Syracuse podcast.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Friday podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen with us every single weekday, only place for daily SU pods. And today's episode is brought to you by NetSuite. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. Head to netsuite.com/LockedOnNCAA for special end-of-the-year financing on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. Tim, Leonard, Tyler Aki, and we dive into Virginia now, who is not playing good basketball. Very similar, actually, to Syracuse in terms of their metrics and stuff. Actually, if anything, a little bit worse, but same exact record, 7-5 on the season. They beat Providence. That's kind of their one win of note so far. The only other top 200 KenPom win came over Pittsburgh on a wild buzzer beater from Jaden Gardner to end that game.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, net ranking 113. Syracuse is 93 in the net. They're not a talented team. I think that's the big takeaway is they lost a lot from last year. It's still Virginia at its core. It's still that defensive-minded team, and Tony Bennett's still the head coach, so you got to be cautious of sleeping on them, but at the same time, they really lack talent.
So I've kind of been thinking back and forth pretty much throughout the season, and these are the two teams that I go back and forth with. Which fan base is more pissed off at their team right now?
Yeah.
Syracuse or Virginia? And it's probably Virginia. And just the way that this was a team that won a national championship, 3 years ago? And
right. I think that's why they're less pissed off, though, because at least they have that to fall back on. Maybe.
But Syracuse sort of has those tournament runs and stuff like it.
Yeah.
It's more of there's a sector of the Virginia fan base that absolutely loathes Tony Bennett. There's a sector of the entirety of the sport of college basketball that absolutely loathes Tony Bennett. And this is their passion fuel right now. Seeing it not work here, seeing it not work in that 2018 tournament, this is what gets them up in the morning. This is that shot of energy for them. And to see the way that Virginia is playing right now, and you laid out the net rankings, the KenPoms, all that stuff, yeah, Virginia is the more pissed off fan base, I think, right now, at least in the given moment that we sit on here on this New Year's Eve right now. And I think that, yeah, like Syracuse is the home team here. They maybe have a little bit going for them right now. They've won their past 2 games. They're maybe hopefully finding a little rhythm, but who knows? I mean, this game can literally go any certain way. It really can. No result would shock me one bit.
And that's how the ACC is going to be this year, I think. There is a whole lot of after Duke. And a lot of those teams, even like you take a look at Virginia's last game, Clemson. They play Clemson at home. They lose by 17. You wouldn't have guessed that. You look at how Notre Dame started. They lose to BC. Virginia Tech loses at home to Wake, who we now know is pretty decent. Wake almost beat Louisville on the road the other night. But everyone's kind of just grouped into a tier there, and they're all fighting to get back on the bubble or stay on the bubble and stay as an 11-10 seed range. So that's the ACC right now.
And like everyone
Virginia's
sort of has a good win to them too, right? Like Syracuse can hoist their flag on that road victory against Florida State. You've got Notre Dame who went out and beat Kentucky. Like
Kentucky,
all these teams, they're going to have their games. They're going to have their nights. And that's kind of the nature of the sport in general. But yeah, it's going to be one of those anyone can sort of beat anyone unless it's Duke, and in which case Duke's probably going to win most of those games.
Right. Virginia 71 on KenPom, Syracuse 63 right now. Bart Torvik is way lower on Virginia, 91. Syracuse is 61 on Bart Torvik. Their offense is 107 on KenPom. That's fine. That's never really a huge leading metric for Virginia. I guess the national title team did have a really good offense,
they were hyper efficient. They were number 2. Their offense was actually better than their defense that season, believe it or not.
And that's a rarity, I guess. But Defensively, under Tony Bennett, which, by the way, I hope there really aren't many people that hate Tony Bennett, because how can you hate Tony Bennett? Just such a good basketball coach.
Listen, I'm just pointing out a sector that is out there.
Right? I'm sure it's out there. Yeah.
The radicals of college basketball, if you will.
Yeah. Right. You can't get it done in the tournament. That type of crowd is definitely out there. But defensively, they're 56 on Ken Palm's adjusted defensive efficiency. That is as bad as they've been since 2011, in the second year under Tony Bennett, when they were just starting to incorporate a system and they were just a bad overall basketball team, which they kind of are right now as well. But I mean, they're usually top 5, top 3 in defensive efficiency on Ken Palm. That metric, seeing 56, is shocking to see it on a Virginia team. So I do think they're very beatable, but I also think at their core, they still have a defensive style that has given Syracuse fits this year, which is physical defense. Like Kihei Clark has given Joe Girard fits in the past because he guards him full court. He gets right up on you. So as much as there's not a lot of returning guys, Kihei Clark's pretty much it. Reese Beekman, who hit the shot against us to win the tournament's back. But their two quote-unquote best players might be Jaden Gardner from ECU and Al Franklin from Indiana. It's a lot of newcomers.
Yeah, I will say this. Joe Girard has done a little bit better the past 2 meetings against Virginia. His last 2 games, he has a total of 3 turnovers against UVA. It's some of those early games that kind of gave him trouble. But you're right. This is in terms of a stylistic standpoint, this is something that does give him trouble. And that worries me in a game like this. Now, on the flip side, what's one way to beat Syracuse? It's to hit the 3 ball. This is a putrid 3-point shooting team from Virginia. I mean, who are you going to point to as sort of the guy that can get things going? You talked about who are the talented players on this Virginia team. Well, you've got Jaden Gardner, who isn't going to shoot threes, right?
Yeah,
and then you've
he
got
can't shoot anything outside of 15 feet. Yeah.
Right. And then you've got Armon Franklin, who's going to shoot threes, but he shoots it at a 20% clip. So that doesn't scare you one bit.
He's a little better than that, I would say, normally. But yeah, he's not shooting it well. That's for sure.
So that's one of the ways to beat Syracuse, and this is a team that, quite frankly, doesn't have that in them right now. They're 239th in the country in 3-point percentage, shooting about 32% on the season. So if there's one sort of mismatch there that favors Syracuse, it's the fact that this is a Virginia team that's probably not going to shoot threes very well.
Yeah, the only thing is, pretty much every team has been able to shoot against Syracuse this year. Even
I'm
VCU.
Curious to the volume. I'm curious what the volume is going to be like from a 3-point shooting standpoint. Like what did Cornell shoot? What did we have? 46 threes the other day in a 40-minute game. And this is a Virginia team that doesn't shoot a lot of threes either.
But they usually do against the zone, I feel like. And I went back and looked. So last year, first time we played him was a total bloodbath. Kihei Clark was in the middle of the zone, just carving us up, making nice passes. It'd be interesting to see if he goes back to that here. But 14 for 31 from 3 in the first game. Then they shot 35 threes in the ACC tournament game, which was a great overall game. There's been a lot of good Syracuse-Virginia games. They're 11 for 35.
Since joining the conference, there has not been a better opponent to watch games for Syracuse than Virginia. Those are always competitive games. I know there's a couple clunkers here and there, but for the most part, it's competitiveness, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I would say NC State is also kind of sneaky up there. I feel like we always have good games with them. But yeah, I totally agree. I think Virginia's been right up there with thrilling games. There's that Elite 8 game that stands out. The year after that, when Boeheim got his 1,000th with the asterisk, was against Virginia. But 11 for 35 last time. So they seem to sort of settle for threes. And I just have this terrible memory. I think it was it Parentes who just made like 5 or 6 right at the top of the zone? It was one of those guards in that 2015, 2016 era where they kind of just settled and couldn't get it inside the zone.
I think maybe it was Brogdon,
yeah. I don't know who it was, but it's just like they will have guys. I think Kihei Clark's not a great shooter, but he can at least hit it. Beekman can hit it. So I still think they put up a lot of volume here and they make a lot of threes in this game. And that's just because Syracuse's defense is just not really holding anyone to decent marks from 3-point range.
Yeah, I would say they put up a lot of volume. I don't know necessarily if they'll make them. We'll see. That's kind of the wait and see game.
Right. All right, we'll get in the prop shop in just a second. Also get you Dabbundo's digits in a little bit, but this is it. The putt to win the tournament. If you sink it, the championship is yours. But on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. Is this how you want to be running your business? Poor visibility because you're still relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software. To see the full picture, you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. Over 28,000 businesses already use NetSuite. For the new year, NetSuite has a new financing program for those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/locked. Head to netsuite.com/locked for this special one-of-a-kind financing offer on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. That's netsuite.com/locked. So the prop shop, we have pretty similar records still. I went 4-2 in the Cornell game. You went 2-4. I'm sitting at 24-30 on the year. You're 21-32, Tyler. We'll start with this. Who wins the rebounding battle in this game? Because doing some research on Virginia, a big difference in this year's Virginia team compared to the typical Tony Bennett era Virginia teams is they are not rebounding the basketball. You look at KenPom's defensive rebounding rate, they have been top 50 every year under Tony Bennett. The first 11 years under him, top 50 in the country in defensive rebounding rate. This year, they're 221st in the nation. So it's not even like they're just on the outside. They've had a huge drop-off. Rebounding margin right now, Syracuse enters this game 279th in the NCAA, UVA 252nd. I'm going to say Virginia wins the rebounding battle, but it's not going to be as bad as some of these other Virginia teams.
I'm going to go with Syracuse actually in this one, and it's more of a stylistic thing because one of the principles of the pack line defense is getting back and getting set up in your defense because that's more important and preventing some of those transition opportunities. It's all a stylistic thing. You want to get back in your shells defensively, and that's something that Jesse Edwards, he's had some of those balls poked away from him by a guard or something like that. Jimmy Boeheim, Cole Swider, all those guys making some of those rebounds. If you're going to get an offensive rebound, if you're Virginia, it's going to be a long offensive rebound in all likelihood because once that shot goes up, there's very little commitment to the offensive glass, and that's something that's killed Syracuse. I don't think it's going to be as much of a problem in this game.
Yeah, I think this is a test again. How physical can Jesse get? Cole Swider needs to be
I almost
physical.
think it could be a misnomer, too, from a rebounding standpoint, because they may not have to get physical and they may get a few more rebounds in this game, but I don't know if it's going to tell the true story of how well they actually rebounded the basketball.
Right. I hear you on that. I guess also just you're going up against a team that is going to be guarding you tight and playing you physical and looking to.
From that standpoint, yeah. But
yeah.
I wouldn't use necessarily rebounding as a toughness metric in this game.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Next up on the prop shop, Jaden Gardner, best player for Virginia, ECU transfer, averaging 14.8 points per game, 8.1 rebounds per game. Will set his over-under for points at 15.5. And I'm going to take the over. I think he is the typical player that burns Syracuse. He reminds me almost a little bit of Aminu Muhammad for Georgetown, his height's only 6'6", 6'7", somewhere in that neighborhood, but he's a big guy that plays with his back to the basket, scores a lot down low. I just really think he's going to give us fits. I would probably take the over even if it was 19 or 20 because I think he's a matchup nightmare.
Yeah, I think the one thing is if he is going to focus in on operating in that low post area too, then you've got some shot blockers back there for Syracuse, but I think they're going to be able to at least pull Jesse out. I think that's going to be one thing that they're going to try to do. Try to pull Jesse out to some of these corners, wing areas, and then fire it down low to Gardner because of ball movement. So I'll go with you. I'm not going to aim as high as like a 20 but I think it'll hover around that 15.5 number, but I'm with you. I'll take the over on it.
Joe Girard, 15.5 points, will set his over-under at. We touched on how Kihei Clark and really all their perimeter defenders, that's just their style, is going to be trying to sort of bait you into threes and really make it tough on you to make it your way up the court. Joe's coming off kind of a sluggish game. I'm probably going to ride with the under here, but he's the type of player that is pretty much the X factor in this game for me. If he's able to handle the pressure, if Syracuse is able to get into their offensive system and just score enough, because Virginia's not going to score more than I'd say 70 points in this game. And even that's probably on the lofty side. So Girard, if he has a good game, I don't really see a world where Syracuse loses this game to Virginia.
I'm with you there. I'm probably going to take the over, though, because this feels like a game, feels like a Joe Girard bounce back spot. You know what I mean? Like, he just got crushed. People were saying it's Sienna Joe is back. All that stuff is kind of being fired his way. And he sees it. He knows what's happening there. but he is one of those guys who, okay, he had a rough performance, but this is going to be this might be the biggest crowd of the year that we'll see at the Dome so far. Not saying for the whole season, but
so far
up to this point. And there haven't been a lot of home games either, but it's going to be a battle between this one and the Indiana game of which is going to be the highest one to date. Could be one of those big crowd environments. And I think Joe, he thrives under that stuff. And he's started to get a little bit better at playing under the pressure that Virginia's thrown at him as of late. I mentioned he's only had the 3 turnovers in his last 2 games. He has 3 turnovers and a half against some of these really bad Ivy League teams. So I think this could be a nice little bounce back spot for him. So I'll go with the over 15.5.
Yeah. Also, beer's back at the Dome too, so the crowd will be a little more
back.
rowdy, maybe. Yeah. All right.
That's what he likes.
Yeah, exactly. He'll get him going, hopefully. I think he's the X factor in this game. As for who will lead Syracuse in scoring, a favorite of us on the podcast here, we'll start with Buddy again, who's done it the past 2 games. He's at plus 110 odds. Gerard plus 235. Jimmy plus 275. Swider plus 375, coming off a game where he very nearly did lead until Buddy hit a jumper late. Jesse plus 500. Benny plus 1,000 or other plus 1,000. I think I'm just going to go Buddy again. I did it last game. I thought Cole Swider was going to rob it from me, and he hit the jumper late. He came through. So I'm going to ride with Buddy.
I'm going to go with Buddy too, because it comes down to this, all right? Who is going to guard Buddy Boeheim in this game? Like, do you throw Kihei Clark on him because he's the best defender on your team and you've got him going up against him? But, I mean, you're talking about an 8-inch difference there.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Between 2 players. Like, you can't do that. And then everyone else is still a little bit smaller and definitely don't have the same
it's Franklin. I would guess. But I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be Beekman or Franklin. And either way, you're going to be at a multiple inch disadvantage from a height standpoint. Buddy's starting to find a little bit of a rhythm right now. I think we could be, you kind of touched on this last show too, or a couple shows ago. This could be the start of the Buddy run where he kind of gets his mojo back. He's starting to shoot the ball a little bit better. This could be the start of that.
He's 31% from 3 right now. We're going to look up at the end of January and see a 36, 37.
Before we previewed the Brown game, he was 27%.
Yeah.
And I get you played Brown and Cornell. I get that. Okay. But 4% at this juncture in the season doesn't happen.
Yeah. No, I think he can get to his spots against this Virginia. He's played well against Virginia. I mean, that big almost half court shot. I just think that he's the guy that when competition and tight defense is happening, really him and Jimmy have been the two that have proved it doesn't matter what type of competition is out there. Sure, teams have defended Buddy a little bit tighter this year and his numbers at times have slipped. But Villanova, Jimmy brought it. Cole Swider didn't play that great, and that was a tough game for him for a lot of other reasons, obviously. But I worry more about Joe, Cole, Jesse when it's a physical defensive team like Virginia. And Jimmy and Buddy are usually playing their game.
Yeah. So last year, I think the COVID pause really hurt Buddy. Yeah. I think this year it might have actually helped him. Because he went through that stretch of all those games. And not only was he slumping, but I think he was slumping because he was just dog-ass tired, right? And now he's got a little bit of time. And again, this is going to be his 3rd game of the week. So maybe he's a little bit more tired, a little more sluggish going into this one. But I think him getting his legs under him a little bit more, he looks fresher. He hasn't had to play as many minutes the last 2 games as he's used to as well. So I think all of that, the calculus sort of lines up for him to go on a little bit of a run here.
All right, well, that is our amateur betting preview, prop shop wise. We'll hand it over to a real gambler, Anthony Dabbundo, who's over at the Action Network. Always gives us some great numbers with Dabundo's digits before every game. He's back this week. Here's our guy, Anthony Dabbundo.
The numbers you need to know. Anthony Dabbundo breaks down the biggest stats for this week's Syracuse matchup. Everybody! Dabundo's digits. If you ain't taking stats, get the out the class. On the Locked On Syracuse Podcast.
Where you at? Let's go. The Office of Dabundo's Digits is back after a COVID pause and bad non-conference teams that probably weren't worth this full breakdown. But ACC play is truly here to go, and it's Virginia. It's a matchup of weakness on weakness as the Virginia offense takes on the Syracuse defense. Virginia in the pack line may not be as elite as years past defensively, but the Hoos are still elite at protecting the rim. They rank 6th best in near proximity field goal percentage allowed, according to Haslam metrics. The Virginia defense is known in the past for being excellent at preventing teams from getting out in transition and getting second chance looks, but that hasn't quite been the case this season for the Hoos. They're just 283rd in potential points allowed off of steals and 240th in potential second chance points allowed. They're not rebounding defensively at the elite rate they were last year. To me, that's a sign that this Virginia team is having some growing pains given all the turnover within the program over the last year. Those are two areas you'd expect Virginia to be better, and some coaching from head coach Tony Bennett might improve them there. They've had about 10 days off in between these two games. The Hoos rank 257th in minutes continuity this season. A lot of pieces from last year's team are gone. It's a very new team. They don't have the elite defense of years past, but more importantly, they don't have any consistent scoring. Syracuse fans should remember the Virginia backcourt of Kihei Clark, the last holdover from the national championship team, and Reese Beekman, who made that three at the horn in the AC tournament last year. But Clark has developed a lot offensively. Beekman really hasn't. Clark defensively has had the number of Joe Girard in some matchups in the past. That could be a concern, but Beekman still doesn't make any shots despite his elite defense. He's nationally ranked in both block and steal rate. The backcourt, though, is the only real returning minutes for this Virginia team. Virginia's perimeter defense this year, they've been more unlucky than bad. They've allowed the 11th fewest open threes on catch-and-shoot looks in the entire country. They rank 44th against mid-range shots, too. That's two areas where Syracuse's offense likes to live. The personnel suggests Virginia's defense should be better than its Ken Pom and Bart Torvik defensive ratings suggest this year, and I'd expect some improvement from them. But the offensive frontcourt of Jaden Gardner, transfer from ECU, and Armand Franklin, transfer from Indiana, do not have the scoring or shooting of last year's team. Virginia has fallen from 24th last season in three-point shooting all the way to 237th. That's a big problem when you're facing a 2-3 zone. The Cavs last year, elite at protecting the ball, top 10 in turnover rate. This year offensively, 90th, considerably worse there. Now Franklin has only made 20% from deep this year. Similar to Buddy Boeheim though, he's a better shooter than that, and you'd expect some positive shooting regression coming for him. Gardner's more of a slashing wing, tends to get to the basket off the dribble more. Very hard to do against a 2-3 zone, so it'll be an interesting matchup for him. It'll also be interesting to see who Virginia puts at the top of that 2-3 zone in the middle if Syracuse plays it. They did do some Kihei Clark there last year. Wouldn't be surprised if we saw some of him there. He's an elite passer out of the post. Bart Torvik gives Syracuse a 74% chance to win this game. Predicted 65-60. Ken Pom, Orange at 64%. Predicted score 66-62. And my new favorite model, shot quality model, has Syracuse at just 60% to win this game by a projected 64-61 score. All in agreement of a close Syracuse win, but if the Virginia defense ratchets up the pressure and improves defensively on the perimeter as we're expecting, this could be a really difficult game for the Orange, but it's the kind of game Syracuse has to win at home if it wants to have any shot of assembling an NCAA tournament resume in March. I know this isn't your older siblings, Virginia, when it comes to elite defense or some notable names and elite shooters on offense, but the Cavs have some shooting regression coming, and they've had a lot of success against this zone in the past. I think it's a pretty tricky matchup for Syracuse.
All right, thanks to Dabbundo. As always, go follow him on Twitter at Anthony Dabbundo. Sounds like he's favoring Virginia, maybe a little bit there, but who knows how he's thinking. He
gave us a hint that one of our tough luck friends in terms of a gambling standpoint loves Syracuse with the points. So tread lightly, all right?
We apologize to all the Syracuse fans out there. We won't name said friend in case he's listening, but if he is listening, he probably knows, Yeah. he's one of those people.
Let's just put it this way. What was it, the Drexel game earlier this year where they got backdoored? Really, really tough.
And Dabbundo benefited,
And Dabbundo benefited, and this guy caught the short end of the stick, so.
Yeah. So anyway, we apologize to the Syracuse fans. It honestly might influence my pick that we're about to make in just a second. that I heard that this said unnamed person is wagering on Syracuse. It looks like, and we'll get into all that in just a second. We'll go over our prediction for this game, but it is the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. It's going to be a lot easier, I promise you, to stay committed to those New Year's resolutions because Built Bars, they are healthier for you. They're really good for you. They're a protein bar, but they also taste like a candy bar, and they're maybe even better than a candy bar. Take it from us. They are delicious. Every time I eat one, I don't understand how they're covered in 100% real chocolate and good for you. And they just looking at some of the calories that they contain, 130 calories in an average bar, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. That's healthiness, but it somehow tastes delicious. So here's an idea for the new year. Go to all your secret treat stashes at home, in the pantry, at the office, in the car, wherever. Throw out all the sugary or calorie-filled treats and replace them with Built bars. So when you're craving a snack or treat, you can reach for something that's actually healthy for you and tastes incredible. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. So let's transition into what we think is actually going to happen in this Syracuse-Virginia game. Will Syracuse win the game? Right now, KenPom projecting the Orange to win. Dabbundo laid it out a little bit, but it's 66-62 is the prediction that I'm seeing here as we record on Thursday night. I would say if I had to pick, Syracuse wins the game, but I do think Virginia is the team that I would lean towards from a betting perspective. We haven't seen the BetOnline.ag line yet, but if it is around that KenPom number, I'm like 52-53% Syracuse wins, so I'd probably just lean with the points if I was betting.
Yeah, and again, I think there's a wide variety of outcomes that can occur here. I think Syracuse can blow them out. I think Syracuse can get blown out. I think it can be a medium, like 7 to 10 point win. I think it can be a 3-2 point win as well for either side. So I think the variety of outcomes is extreme here. And I very rarely say that about games. I very rarely, but this is truly one of those games where I feel it. In terms of the spread, or like the projected spread of 4 that KenPom's thrown out there, I'm with you. I'd probably take Virginia, but like I do think Syracuse ekes one out. It feels like they kind of trade blows back and forth almost, right? And Virginia got the better of them in that big emotion-filled ACC tournament game last year. So it feels like, all right, this is the Syracuse game. But if they were to play in the ACC tournament and Syracuse wins this one by 2-3 points, maybe a last-second shot, I could totally see Virginia going out there and handing it right back to them in the ACC tournament.
Virginia has been really bad this year, with the exception of the Providence game. So I don't really have a lot of faith in counting on them to come through. But here are a couple things that worry me. One, haven't played a game in 10 days, and Tony Bennett's got some time to prep, which I guess haven't played a game in 10 days could be a negative, a little rusty, and they looked really bad against Clemson. But I'm worried about the prep time for Tony Bennett, the practice time, going into a Syracuse game where he has a playbook on the 2-3 zone now. Kihei Clark was a great solution last year. Do they go to that? And then defensively, I just think Syracuse offensively for Syracuse going against Virginia's defense, that scares me. Syracuse just hasn't played good against good defenses this year on offense. I know they've scored a lot of points overall in the Indiana game. They racked up points, and even Georgetown, but Villanova is a similar type of physical style defense. They scored 53 points. I look at what they've done the past couple times against Virginia's D. They were 5 for 23 from 3 in the first game last year, 8 for 22 last year. 3-point shooting is the key, because I think Virginia could get to double figures in 3-point shooting. And then Syracuse probably has to be in the neighborhood of 8 or 9 in order to not get into a lopsided margin that's going to make it tough to win the game.
You know what's funny is you bring up how Tony Bennett has the playbook on the 2-3 zone. We're coming up on 10 years of Syracuse being in the ACC.
It's nuts. Yeah.
And for a guy like Tony Bennett, who not only has he been around for that entire ride, but feels like Syracuse plays Virginia 3 times a year, a decent amount, it almost feels, or at least 2 times a year, a decent amount. And I'd be interested. Maybe we can break this down next week. But now that they're coming up on 10 years, and again, it's not quite 10 years, but I would like to see the breakdown of coaches and their record against Syracuse in the last 5 years in terms of their tenure. So like Wake Forest has had a couple coaching changes, and look at their success against Syracuse. Meanwhile, you've got teams like Coach K and Duke. Roy Williams was there for the longest time, and he dominated Syracuse. You have Tony Bennett at Virginia. See what those tenured coaches who, after the first 5 years of maybe feeling it out, these last 3-4 years, seeing what their records are against Syracuse. I think that'd be really interesting to look at.
Yeah, I will say Probably North Carolina is our kryptonite team in the conference, if you had to pick one, just based on how they usually match up really well against us. They rebound the basketball. This year might be a little bit different. You could make a case that we are Virginia's kryptonite. And I say that because, like Virginia has won more games. I'm looking through the record here. So since 2014, Virginia won the first three. They won 2014, 2015, 2016 in the regular season. Then we win in the tournament in the Elite Eight, win the next year. And then they won 63-55. Syracuse won in an overtime game that Buddy hit that shot in 2020 at Charlottesville against a decent Virginia team that year. And then just challenging them in the ACC tournament last year. There's definitely, if you're a Virginia fan that follows them every year, part of you is probably like, I don't like Syracuse. Yeah, they've gotten us, right?
Right. No, I'm totally with you. And I think of like I believe she used to be at Streaking the Lawn, the SB Nation, basically the Noon's Magician equivalent for Virginia. But Caroline Darney used to always tweet about how much she would hate Syracuse because it was a nightmare. Every single time it felt like something bad was going to happen. And there's scar tissue there for sure for this Virginia team and for Tony Bennett, because it feels like a lot of big moments that he's had have been sort of spoiled by Syracuse. I think you could say the same thing vice versa too. Like Virginia's really laid it on Syracuse a couple times. They've also suffered heartbreaking losses too, but they've also given the heartbreak out.
Yeah.
Like you just look at last year's ACC tournament. This is a great little rivalry. And in terms, I know Syracuse will never be Virginia's rival, but Virginia can be Syracuse's. And I think the way that these matchups have played out time and time again, it really is one of the best opponents and the best matchups that Syracuse has had since joining the conference. And I think part of that is no team throws a defense back at Virginia, right? Like no team has a staple to it that throws it right back at Virginia. And again, they don't play the same defense, but there's a scheme in place. And when it's scheme versus scheme, sometimes weird things can happen, as opposed to a team like Duke who doesn't really have scheme. They have talent, and the talent level can vary year to year. But in terms of a scheme, that thing is going to be consistent every single year. And then it just turns into a giant game of chess between the two coaches.
I really have no lean on whether this is a high or a low scoring game. I could see it be high scoring because Virginia puts up more points because Syracuse's defense is just not good right now. Mm-hmm. I could also see Virginia winning the game in an ugly fashion, like 58-52, because Syracuse just can't score. So I guess I will say high scoring, but I don't know about you. I don't really feel great one way or the other on that.
Yeah, I'll go low scoring, just because I think Syracuse will struggle offensively. I think both teams might struggle a little bit offensively. I think it'll be more Virginia's defense impacting Syracuse's offense, and also Virginia's offense being a little more lackluster.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is our Virginia preview podcast. Hope you guys have a good weekend. Happy New Year to everyone out there. Maybe Syracuse gives you a little New Year's gift afterwards, and they get in this game and get a win inside the dome. Would be a big win. And as Dabbundo said in his digits, really kind of a much needed win if you're trying to play the how do you get back into the NCAA tournament conversation. This is a big one. Start of ACC play.
If you start the ACC 2-0 with wins against banner programs. Listen, I know they're not playing at the level that they're used to, but win against Florida State, win against Virginia, at least personally and in your mind, feels good.
That's big. Yeah. Beating Tony Bennett and Leonard Hamilton the first two games, that would mean something. That'd be a great
You're beating two of the three best coaches in the conference right out of the gate. No
doubt. So thanks for making us